regulation C.08.001. That's where you'll find the regular test. And you might want to go and check the regular test before COVID, because they changed the law since COVID. But normally, you have to prove 3 things, and 2 of them are in the test. So you've got to provide the Minister of Health under the regular test with a whole bunch of safety data and a whole bunch of efficacy data. And you have to basically prove to the Minister of Health the drug is safe and that the drug's effective. Now, the third part isn't written into the regulation, but it's required by both national and international criminal law. And that is, you have to do a risk-benefit analysis, especially if the drug is for the general population. And you have to basically conclude, well, the benefits of the drug outweigh the risks, because you'd be breaking criminal law if you allowed a drug for general use that caused more harm than good. You'd be creating criminal negligence, causing bodily harm and or death and likely homicide if people die. So that's our regular drug approval test. About a month before the first 2 COVID vaccine submissions, the Minister of Health exempted COVID drugs from the regular test. So the minister issued an interim order. I have a link to that order in that discussion paper. So now, first of all, it's important to understand, if you're a chemical drug company with a COVID vaccine, you had the option of going through the regular test. It wasn't that you couldn't, but you now had 2 options. So you could go through the regular route, where you have to prove it's safe and you have to prove it's effective, and then you have to prove the benefits outweigh the risks. Or you could go through this new process. Marc, I'll quote the new test. I might get a word or 2 wrong, but this is going to be pretty dang close. I wasn't expecting we were going to have this conversation, but it's just I've studied the test so much that it'd be very easy for me to recite. So the first thing that you need to understand when I recite this test to you, so let's say you're Pfizer. If Pfizer meets this test, Health Canada must issue a license. So Health Canada could be of the belief it's dangerous. Health Canada could be of the belief it doesn't work. Health Canada could be of the belief that the benefits don't outweigh the risks. Health Canada could be of the belief that this is going to be a public health disaster. That doesn't matter. Read the interim order. The word is must. The minister must grant the license if this test is met. So Health Canada has no discretion. It must by law issue if this test is met. The second thing that before I say the test, it's important for your viewers to understand, and you can read the interim order, you didn't have to submit your safety data to get licensed. Can I say that again? You did not have to submit your safety data to Health Canada to get licensed. You just had to explain when you would be expected to send them the known safety data. Well, of course, you wouldn't have to submit your safety data to get licensed because you didn't have to prove it was safe and you didn't have to prove it was effective. I'm going to recite to you the test. And like I say, I might get like the odd unimportant word wrong, but the word safety is not mentioned and the word efficacy is not mentioned because you didn't have to prove safety or efficacy. Again, you have to divorce yourself from the political messaging, which was necessary to get people to accept the vaccine from a government that had already said that was the answer, had already purchased it, had already distributed it before it was approved.
Yeah, that right there is before it's approved.
Before it's approved. And it's illegal to import and to distribute a drug that isn't approved, so the interim order had to exempt them from what they'd already done that was illegal. So here's the test. So it's mandatory. So the test is the minister has sufficient evidence to support the conclusion, and I'll stop there, of what follows. We're already in a world of hurt. The Minister of Health Canada, we're in a subjective test. So if Pfizer, for example, has to prove what follows, it should read the minister has sufficient evidence to conclude the minister's conclusion. or the minister must conclude. But it says the minister has sufficient evidence to support the conclusion. Whose? I don't know. But now we're just into an argument. We're into a subjective test. So Pfizer just has to be able to argue what follows, right? We're now into an argument. So the minister has sufficient evidence to support the conclusion, not the minister's, that the benefits of the new drug outweigh the risks, having regard to the uncertainties concerning the benefits and risks and the urgent public health emergency presented by COVID-19. So safety isn't mentioned. You don't have to prove it's safe. You don't even have to argue it's safe. You don't have to prove it works. You don't have to even argue it works. But you do have to be able to present a cogent argument the benefits outweigh the risks. Now, the interesting thing is in the drug approval world, if safety isn't proven, and safety is relative, I mean, some drugs aren't really safe, which is why we put restrictions like it has to be by prescription, for example. So unless the safety profile is proven, and unless the efficacy profile is proven, you can't actually do a risk-benefit analysis. So when it says, the minister has sufficient evidence to support the conclusion the benefits of the drugs outweigh the risks, Health Canada can't know because the data isn't there, which is why, by law, the next part of the test is having regard to the uncertainties concerning the benefits and risks. So can you imagine, by law, Health Canada is being told it's okay if you don't know. So Pfizer, using Pfizer as an example, if Pfizer can argue the benefits outweigh the risks, even though you don't know, my wife just handed me a note saying, tell you the sound is off for both of us. So the double inputs.
Oh,
so on
really?
the broadcast, the sound is it at all, or is it just not good?
On YouTube. On YouTube, it sounds good.
Oh, so it sounds weird on YouTube, but okay on X?
No, it's not. It's not.
Okay.
We're not sounding good?
No,
No, it's
yeah,
not sounding
the
good.
quality apparently is not great.
It's like a weird echo.
Oh, okay, 1 second. Okay, how's that?
She'll go and check and get back to us.
Yeah,
So,
hey, you know what? We're live for the first time, but the information is amazing, and I do want the best quality. So hopefully, what I did.
right. So back to, so you cannot actually do a risk-benefit analysis without safety and efficacy being proven. But Health Canada, by law, on that test is they're told having regard to the uncertainties concerning the benefits and risks and the public health emergency presented by COVID-19. It's basically a political direction to Health Canada to approve pretty well every COVID-19 vaccine. Now, this is legal fact. Anyone can look it up. And all of the COVID-19 vaccines, as I say, the manufacturers had the option of going the regular route, but none of them did. And then the interim order under the Food and Drug Act, they only last for a year. So before the year was up, Health Canada, or the government of Canada, actually put this emergency test, this interim test, they added it to our drug regulations. So when you go to the drug regulations C.08.001, you'll now see this type of language is in there, but it only applies to COVID drugs. And then, so every manufacturer then applied for a regular drug identification number under this emergency order. So none of them have ever gone through the regular test. But we totally segued. We were on cloned meat, and now
No, but you know what? I think this ties to the clone meat situation. Because basically we have our government that's we're going to get into it. So this is part of it, I believe.
Right, but you have to understand messaging. So remember, we were talking about manufacturing consent. Well, on the COVID vaccine, and again, I don't care whether you supported it or didn't support it. I'm just talking about how governments get consensus by what a process called manufacturing consent. And I challenge everyone to read watch the documentary Manufacturing Consent, which was made in the 70s. I mean, there's nothing new here. This has been going on for as long as you and I have been around. But if you want to get people to take the vaccine, they need to believe that it's proven to be safe and effective. So that's political messaging. I'm just pointing out to you that the legal reality is a little different. That when you look at what happened legally, none of the vaccines were proven to be safe or effective because that wasn't a requirement. And so the applications that they filed wouldn't been tailored that way. So,
and they all be nice if the government was transparent about that. I mean, that's not what we received. The public didn't know about that. They thought it was safe and effective, and they trusted the government. That is another reason why I create my content. We need people to wake up and mass awakening. We need information to be flowing. We're not getting our information from mainstream media. These podcasts and what we're doing is so powerful. And that's why you're on the show, Shawn, sharing the information.
Right. So, but you have to understand, I mean, there's a purpose to creating national myths and national beliefs in manufacturing consent. I mean, we could be in a war in Russia at this time next year, right? Because we've got a currency system collapsing, and all fiat currency systems do collapse. And Marc, show me where that's happened without a war. There's always a war. So I'm just saying we could be in a war. Well, if that happened, just talking about manufacturing consent, then our mainstream media and our government messaging would have to be creating support for us to, to prosecute a war. So we would be taught to hate Russians and that they're doing evil things and stuff like that. To use a real life example that you and I would have witnessed, the first Gulf War, mainstream media, I forget where I watched it, CNN or NBC or whatever. So the first Gulf War, so Iraq's invaded Kuwait, and then there's this big media blitz about how in a Kuwaiti hospital, Iraqi soldiers have gone into the neonatal intensive care unit and have taken premature babies out of the bassinets so that they would die. And we actually showed a nurse, a Kuwaiti nurse, testifying about of seeing this. Well, she wasn't a Kuwaiti nurse. She was the Iraqi ambassador's daughter, and she hadn't been to Kuwait for years. This was pure propaganda to basically convince us to support the Iraq war. And I fell for that one. When I learned that, wait a second, I fell for that. I learned, okay, wait a second, I need to be more critical of the media. But it's a real good example of how they manufacture our consent by creating media stories and beliefs that are meant to play on our emotions.
So I actually pulled up your manufacturing consent chart that you have on your website. Should we take a look at that?
Sure.
Okay, let's try to reframe it so it looks normal. All right, here we go. So what are we looking at, Shawn?
Oh, heck, I got to go big screen here. You're making me work. I can't really see it very well. You'd
One
have
second,
to make it a little
I'll
bigger.
make it bigger for everybody. All right. So what I could do, I could read it out for you, Shawn. Manufacturing consent. Health Canada. We will approve clone meat, no labeling. Public outcry. We demand labeling. Health Canada. Okay, we have listened to you and we will pause. Public. We won against the system. Health Canada. We will now approve clone meat with labeling. The public. Okay, I guess. Health Canada. Now we will decide it's safe and there is no labeling, no need for labeling.
Absolutely. So I was explaining this earlier when I was saying, imagine that we're Health Canada and our goal is to get Canadians to eat cloned meat without labeling. If we just came out and said we're going to allow cloned meat, but very strict labeling, there's no way you're going to eat in a restaurant or buy it at a grocery store without knowing it's cloned, we likely then would say, no, we're not eating cloned meat at all. And then they're not getting us to eat it without labeling. Because if the question was, should we eat it, even if we know it's cloned, then we would we'd ask, well, should we? And I already explained how awful the cloning process is. It's not economic. Like, why on earth would we? And the animals are more sickly. The process itself lends itself to unpredictable genetic defects. Nobody's tested for those. So no, we'd say no. So you create a fake issue. So here Health Canada just changes on their website, well, we're going to declassify it. It's no longer a novel food, which means that it can be entered into food into the Canadian marketplace without any labeling that it's cloned. Now, the media knew this beforehand. Like, Marc, I just drove with my wife with an old VW van, which, made it a sexy story. We drove across Canada for 3 weeks, holding 25 live events across Canada, and we delivered the third largest paper petition in Canadian history, calling on Parliament to enact this health charter. The media doesn't pick this up at all. I mean, we had professionally drafted press release before we left, and then for a press conference in the press gallery in Parliament Hill. We paid to have it send it out to the wire service. The press gallery sends it out a second time, the wire service. It's live streamed to every media outlet in Canada. Nothing. And I can tell you time and time again, when these types of issues arise, the media deliberately ignores it. But not this, because they were in cahoots with Health Canada. So if Canada makes this quiet change to a paragraph on their website, but the mainstream media just launches immediately, oh my gosh, Health Canada is going to allow cloned meat without labeling. Well, they say it's safe, and the FDA says it's safe. And, it was almost like there was one repeat expert. There were a couple of other experts, but, oh yeah, it's safe. So it's like the mainstream media, we're not looking at the real issue. Should we be eating it? They're saying, oh, they're going to allow it, but don't you think it should be labeled? And then we're all predictably responding to the story. Yes, there should be labeling on social media, on everything. Isn't this outrageous? There's no labeling. Not a single mainstream media, and it's by design, is asking the question, should we have cloned meat at all? Oh, the FDA, the US says it's safe. Oh, well, no mention the EU's banned at all 27 countries because they say it's not safe. Even Health Canada's, analysis, they say we're actually not looking at the known risks of cloned meat like genetic defects. And they're only assessing one type of cloning when there's several types of cloning. So already it's a fraud, and the mainstream media should know that. And their Health Canada's opinion document reads like an apology to try and get it approved. So the mainstream media with one voice diverted us from the main issue of whether we should eat cloned meat at all. We're having this huge national dialogue. There should be labeling, there should be labeling, there should be labeling. It was pre-planned that Health Canada would go, well, we're going to pause this. And then Health Canada's going to come, you watch. Health Canada's going to come back, we don't know when, and they're going to say, you know what, Canadians want labeling of cloned meat. It's no longer a novel food because nobody can come to them and prove it's safe. Again, there's no safety studies. So they're going to declassify it as a novel food, but they're going to come out with separate regulations or policy requiring super strict labeling. Like you and I will look at those labeling requirements and we'll go, wow, this is strict labeling. And then everyone will go, we won. Marc, can you imagine? When has the government ever listened to us? My gosh. 1 for the team, 0 for Health Canada. It's hard to believe. I never thought in my lifetime the government would bend even on an issue like this. And now there's cloned meat in the food supply. And then they'll wait a couple of years. They'll deliberately structure it so they're actually not doing post-market surveillance to see if there's any safety signals. And then after a couple of years, they'll go, well, we had said that the meat is equivalent. And we weren't anticipating any health problems. There are no health problems. This is hurting trade. This is hurting our businesses to require labeling. We're no longer requiring labeling.
But I have a few questions here, Shawn. I heard cloned meat is not even cheaper.
It can't be cheaper. Remember, I went through how difficult it is to clone animals.
So,
and most of the eggs that do take don't live. most of the animals that start growing in the womb don't survive, and then a large number of those that do survive to birth, they die, and those that do make it to adulthood where you could eat them require more medical attention. It is way more expensive. So there aren't manufacturers lining up to sell us cloned meat because there's some economic advantage. So do you want to know why they're doing it?
Yes, yes,
So
I want to know why they're doing it.
It's in Health Canada's, excuse me, opinion document. So they outline the problems, how difficult it is to clone animals. And then they say, but the benefits are biopharmaceuticals, biochemicals, and later on in a different paragraph, introducing genetic modifications into the population. So let's say that, well, there's been public talk about this, about putting, let's just use mRNA or mRNA vaccines. There's been public talk, it's been in the media. If we could introduce these into our food, then we wouldn't need vaccination programs because people would become automatically vaccinated just by eating. So let's say you wanted to genetically modify a cow to make a new mRNA vaccine. That would be really, really hard to do. Like really hard to do to get the right one, you know, where it's made so much of this, it's in all over, doesn't matter whether, you know, you're eating the ribs or eating the flank, it's there, you're going to get vaccinated. It's in such large numbers that some's going to survive cooking. Like you might have to do 10,000 animals to get the right cow. You might have to genetically modify 10,000 cows to get the right one.
Shawn, you've lost me. So you're telling me that the way that they're going to vaccinate everybody 100% is they're going to clone the meat to get to this genetic modification, and then as in turn, whoever consumes it will be vaccinated.
What I'm saying is Health Canada says in their own opinion document, which is on their website, and a link to it's in the discussion paper, that the benefits are of cloning, because we've already explained how there's no economic benefit, it's madness, and in fact, it's animal cruelty. Like, it's cruel. A whole bunch of the animals die in utero, a whole bunch of the young animals die, those that live significant enough number suffer terribly, they need more medical care. The EU banned it not only on human safety grounds, but because it violated their law on animal, you know, basically animal cruelty laws. So where are the animal cruelty groups in this discussion? You see how everyone's been focused on labeling. The animal cruelty groups have been diverted and not understanding, oh, the EU has banned this in large part to prevent animal cruelty. So what I'm saying is in Health Canada's own documents, they say the advantages, because there's no economic advantage. The advantages are, and they use the word biopharmaceutical, so that's a drug made by the animal, by a genetically modified animal. They say the advantages are biochemicals, and the advantages are, at a later paragraph, introducing genetic modifications into the population. So, and then I've just pointed out there's already been public discourse in the media about, well, we could solve vaccination program issues if we could put vaccines in our food. And I was just saying, okay, so let's use a cow as an example. If you wanted to get a new mRNA vaccine manufactured by a cow, so it's in the meat in sufficient quantities that even with cooking, you know, on average, the population's going to become vaccinated by eating beef. It might take you 10,000 cows to get the right one. Your only option to introduce it into the food supply is cloning. It doesn't matter how expensive it is. It doesn't matter how difficult it is. It doesn't matter the animal cruelty issues. Your only option is to clone. You can have the cell lines reproducing in the lab. You've got that forever. Once you've got the one animal genetically modified, to manufacture the biopharmaceutical or biochemical you want, you're done. But the only way to get it into the population is by cloning. It doesn't matter that it's difficult. It doesn't matter that it's expensive. It doesn't matter that it's cruel to the animals. It's the only way to get it into the population. And they say it in their document. Otherwise, it doesn't make any sense. Why are we having this discussion? It's not like, again, there's companies lining up to sell us cloned meat. So why are we having this discussion?
Yeah, I mean, they're trying to trick us, obviously, because, you know, it makes zero sense.
Yeah, it makes less than zero sense.
So, you know what? I have you. So Shawn created a very good paper. He wrote, should I bring that up?
Yeah, sure. So, and where you can get this paper is nhppa.org. And Marc, you see what I did here is I tried to make it easy for people, because a lot of people, they don't want to read a 15-page paper, but the first page and a half are just the key points. So they're the conclusions that, you know, the following sections point out. So, you know, the first one just points out all 27 countries of the European Union are not eating cloned meat. The European Union has banned the cloning of farm animals. Well, there's a section in the paper that explains that. But if you don't want to read that, the highlights are there. And so basically you could just read a page and a half and you'll understand what's happening. So don't be scared by the fact that it's a long paper. I've structured it so you don't have to read it. But many of you will be absolutely fascinated by it and will read it. So, and Marc, we're just trying to actually have an honest discussion then. Because it's funny, this is kind of your fault. Because you got me on the issue, and then you and we had made that factual error, and I thought, oh, I better look into this. And I came to realize, oh, this is manufactured consent exercise, because it doesn't make any sense at all once you start to understand how difficult it is and how dangerous it is and how misleading the mainstream media articles are. And the mainstream media can't miss it. I mean, 5 minutes of research by a junior reporter, and you're going to know it's banned in the EU. And you're going to know that there's no human safety studies. And, you know, just a little bit of critical analysis of Health Canada's opinion paper. Well, they say we're not addressing the risks of cloned meat. We're just taking the stance that if the meat is equivalent to the meat in other cows, that, using cows as an example, that it's safe, which is
I'm going to try to, I hear the audio is not perfect, so we're going to try something here. How's this? You want to, I made some adjustment. Hey, this is our first live, so there's going to be some learning, but there's some great information happening. So let's see if this worked. We'll ask the chat.
Yeah, the chat is wonderful. It's funny, you know, I was on this this health charter tour, and we would do live openings, and every morning we were broadcasting, and we were staying in, I think it was Barrie, Ontario, at an Airbnb, and my wife Teresa sets me up to do this, you know, the live opening, and they usually take about 45 minutes to an hour, and and then she leaves, and it starts to rain. Well, like, I mean, I'm holding this mic that's, you know, the big cord, and it's all plugged in, and people are talking online. I wonder if he's going to get electrocuted. My wife noticed that and came out and, you know, moved me in under. So thank you, chat. You know, I'm alive only because of you today.
I just
very thankful.
Happy. Chat's happy. I'm all about the chat. So that's good. Hey, Shawn, why don't we go through some of these points? Because
oh yeah.
And then once we've gone through some of it, we're not going to go through all of it. I'm going to put a link in the description once the video's published. You know, the live's going to go, and it'll exist tomorrow. And people will be able to go, and I'll put a link to the actual PDF so people will be able to take a look. It's worth the read. I read it, and I'm just blown away. And thank you so much, Shawn, for putting this together. Without you, nobody would know any of this stuff. So let's just
and just so you know, this is the very first podcast on this paper. And thank you for doing this, because once we came to understand that we're in a manufactured consent exercise, the only way to get people out of it is for them to be able to see that they're in it. So, so this is very helpful, and I think it was helpful for us to have the discussion on vaccination and the Iraq war and the like, so that people can see. If you can see how this happens, then when you're in one, you can get out of it.
Oh, can everybody hear you? I hope so. Yeah, everybody could hear you, so this is good.
Okay, good.
So let's talk about the first point. So you already mentioned that 27 European unions, they don't eat clone meat, and so
Yeah.
when you looked at that, they must have looked at it and said, "There's evidence that it's cruel to animals." And or is there just did they?
Oh no, they actually, the European Union, and it's easy to find, and I'm fairly confident I cite it in this paper so that you'll have a URL. They have a scientific opinion document. So they looked into it and they decided to ban. So they actually, the European Union, not only are the 27 member countries, and none of them are they eating cloned meat, the cloning of farmed animals themselves is banned. So in Canada right now, we're not eating cloned meat, but you can clone farmed animals. The EU has actually banned the cloning of farmed animals, has banned the importation of farmed animals and products from farmed animals. So here we've got the mainstream media in Canada going, oh, it's safe and it's approved in the US. Well, you know, we're in a manufactured consent exercise because they're not telling us, well, wait a second, but our next biggest trading partner is the EU, and they're not eating it there, and they've actually even banned the process. Don't you think that would be good for Canadians to know? They conclude it's unsafe, the EU, and they conclude that it creates too much animal cruelty. Well, last time I checked, Canadians are big on animal cruelty. So how did the mainstream media miss that?
What I don't understand is I thought we were trying to become more European. This seems like something we should adopt. The only thing that we should be adopting is well, this makes sense. So what about basically the real issue in Canada is, should consumption of clone meat be banned? I mean, that should be, and I'll tell you right now, Shawn, I've covered this with you, and I've also published some work on this. 90%, there are some people that are okay with it, but they are only okay with it if the price of the beef is significantly cheaper, because beef prices are way too expensive right now. So like, you know what? If the beef prices was 50% less expensive, I might consider it, because I can't even afford the regular price of beef. But that's only 10%. But 90% is like, no, thank you. I want it not only to, if they're going to push this down, I want it labeled so I just don't buy it. But if they label it, 90% of the population is not going to buy it. So it's not going to work for them.
You see, but it doesn't matter. And you know, it doesn't matter even if they lose money. So like once they introduce it into the market with labeling, they will sell it cheaper, even though they're losing money, because the goal is to get us eating unlabeled clone meat. And then you don't have a choice, because unless you're going to become a vegetarian, if it's not labeled, it's mandatory. You're forced to eat it. And how that works is, you know, you're at a baseball game and you buy a hamburger, or you go to a restaurant and you eat a steak, or, you know, you go to Costco and you buy some ground beef. If it's not labeled, you're eating cloned meat. And you don't have a choice. They might as well pass a law saying Canadians must eat cloned meat. So then you have absolutely no choice. It's mandatory. So without labeling, it's mandatory. I mean, let's talk about genetically modified plants. The public wanted labeling. There is no labeling. There's voluntary labeling. So you'll see non-GMO on people that go out of their way, food producers who go out of their way to avoid GMO, because many people want to avoid it. But it's mandatory. You've eaten genetically modified plants. I've eaten genetically modified plants. I don't want to, but I have no choice. because I'm not willing to stop eating in restaurants. I'm not willing to stop eating at family dinners. Now, somebody close to me is so sensitive to genetically modified wheat and corn that if this person, eats at restaurants, it's like a switch goes off and they have bowel issues. And when they, at their home, they eat organic and it just shuts off. So, I mean, there's a lot of us, at the National Citizens Inquiry, I called pediatrician Dr. Michelle Perro. I called her at this health show, the NHPPA health show. She talks about glyphosate, this round, which is it's used on genetically modified crops. It's horrible, but we don't have a choice. So clone meat, you're going to eat it eventually in Canada, because unless we wake up and when they say no, we're going to allow it with labeling, we say no, we don't want it at all, and make an issue out of it. And the NHPPA is going to have a petition. We're just waiting for it to be approved, calling on Parliament to actually ban clone meat to get us out of this exercise.
I'm pissed right now. I'm sorry, but I'm pissed. This cannot happen. They just continue with this stuff. I'm glad we're covering this because this is unacceptable. Let's go back to this thing. It says Canadians are experiencing a classic case of mass manipulation. Health Canada and the mainstream media have successfully succeeded in limiting public discourse to whether clone meat for human consumption should be labeled. Mass media manipulation avoids the real issue, namely consumption of cloned meat should be banned and cloned of farm animals should be banned. I know you talked about this, Shawn. But what I'm trying to say here is they've done a good job. However, on the other side, like I said, I see people's comments, and the vast majority, I think we have something here because the vast majority of Canadians don't want this. So
no, but the thing is, and I've been dealing with Health Canada for 30 years, and it's very common for them to pause when there's, political pressure, and then they just wait for the pressure to die down and they press ahead. Now, they have signaled quite clearly that in their opinion, and this isn't real, this is just for, they've signaled quite clearly that they're going ahead. They know it's not safe and they know it's reckless, but they have an agenda. They're being given their orders that we need to have cloned meat in the food supply so that we can introduce biopharmaceuticals, biochemicals, and genetic modifications into the population. It's the only way to do it. So that's where we're going, unless we get a ban like the European Union. And then they have to wait longer. I mean, they're not going to stop this stuff. Then they'll just switch to plants, but let's at least protect our meat. So yeah, so I'm really thankful that you're doing this, Marc. It's super important, and we need to get people involved. Like people watching this, you're going to post it online, right?
Oh,
so
yeah.
People need to get
some of this.
Get other people watching it. So read the discussion paper and then watch. We are going to have a petition out. I'll send that to you, Marc, once we've submitted it, but we have to wait for the parliamentary process to approve it.
I'm definitely going to share the hell out of this. All right. And let's, is there any other ones that we should probably look at that pop out to you? I mean, there's quite a bit. I'm on page 1. It goes all the way down.
It's just, the fun part is we literally should be thankful because, when you read all the points, it's so clear we're in a manufactured consent exercise, because it won't take you long. Just Google cloned meat Canada and the mainstream media stories will come up. And when you read them, you'll go, okay, nobody's asking, is this safe? And in fact, in many of the articles, they say, well, it's safe. Health Canada's concluded it's safe, and the FDA's concluded it's safe. And then there's this one expert that now and again is cited in saying it's safe. So the mainstream media is saying, well, it's safe. And they have us only, well, the only issue is there's no labeling. Well, wait a second. Like we could take a 7-year-old and give them 15 minutes and say, can you tell us the issues with cloned meat? And they'd come back to us and say, well, it is banned in the European Union. So how can it be that none of the mainstream media have mentioned that it's banned in the European Union. The 7-year-old would come back to us and say, there are no human safety studies, not a single one. Don't you think that should be mentioned by the mainstream media to the public, that there are no safety studies, human safety studies? There really are no animal safety studies. So for cloned pork, there's none. For beef, there's a few small rat studies of very, it would really only be preliminary data. It would not be enough to justify approval of human clinical trials to address safety. So we're not even there on the animal studies. Don't you think that should be mentioned?
What's the part of the Bill C-69 of 2024 about the labeling component?
The C-69 on, okay. So in C-69 is our 2024 federal budget bill. So when the federal government is, spending hundreds of billions of dollars, they have to create programs, they have to tweak laws. And so the budget bill, they're usually like a phone book, they're really long, and they're meant to enable the federal government to, collect the money they need and to spend the money that they're saying they're going to spend in the ways they're going to spend it. You don't expect there to be substantive changes to our food and drug safety laws, but in the 2024 budget, they made substantive changes to our Food and Drug Act, which basically permit the Minister of Health to exempt any food and drug or any class of food and drugs from really basic fundamental safety provisions in our Food and Drug Act and all of the provisions, safety provisions in our food and drug regulations. So this would enable, remember, the end goal is to have Canadians eating cloned meat that is not labeled, and then it's mandatory. We're all eating cloned meat. I mean, not all the time, but we're all eating cloned meat. To introduce biopharmaceuticals, biochemicals, and genetic modifications. Well, you can't subject the human population to a biopharmaceutical under the Food and Drug Act without requiring labeling. So the Minister of Health is just going to have to exempt, biopharmaceuticals in cloned meat from labeling. So that's why we've mentioned that is they've already put into place the legal framework to enable us to be eating cloned meat, being vaccinated without knowing it, receiving drugs without knowing it, receiving genetic modifications without knowing it. And we know, for example, from genetically modified plants that some of the genetic modifications transfer to us. So one of the problems with genetically modified corn that makes an insecticide called Bt toxin. So it's wonderful for the farmers. The corn itself creates the insecticides. So if the insect eats the corn, the insect dies. Now you and I eat the corn filled with insecticide. You can't avoid it. It's not sprayed on the outside. It's actually made in the corn. But studies have shown then that people that eat genetically modified corn then start making Bt toxin themselves in their digestive tract. So we already know that mechanism exists of transference of genetic, modified things like getting corn to manufacture an insecticide. Well, now you and I, both us, if we were tested, Marc, likely you and I are producing Bt toxin in our digestive tracts. I'd be surprised if we weren't. So you and I are now insecticide manufacturing facilities because of the genetic modification. So
well, I'm guaranteed, because back in the day, it seemed like we were a lot stronger, like as a society, and now people have chronic illness. Everybody's tired all the time. People are constantly trying to we're all on pills for everything. Mm-hmm. And it's clearly because our food is toxic.
Well, our food is toxic, and our food no longer has the nutrients that we need to be healthy. Like, as shocking as it may sound, you need certain nutrients to be healthy. They're not in our food anymore. And anyone can do their own research on this. The U.S. Department of Agriculture, since at least 1900 has been surveying our food supply and and documenting how many vitamins and minerals are in our, vegetables and crops and the like. And it's just been steadily going down. And long ago, they raised the alarm saying you actually cannot get what you need from our food supply anymore. So you must supplement. You will become chronically ill and or die prematurely unless you supplement in Canada. Our food is no longer food. This is, and that in itself is part of the puzzle, isn't it? Like, we've trusted Health Canada to, with our food supply. And, even 20 years ago, like if I walked into a supermarket, like, yeah, I knew there were chemicals and pesticides and herbicides. And, I knew I should avoid processed foods, but I really wasn't worried, Marc. As long as I tried to eat organic and do well, I wasn't worried. Now I'm worried. Like literally, again, let's just put on our conspiracy theory hats and pretend we're Health Canada. And our goal was, let's make the food supply as toxic as possible without the population like reacting and going, you must stop, you must stop. I think we're there. Like, is it possible for our food supply to be any more toxic without the population reacting? I mean, I don't think so. It's garbage. It's awful. And that toxic load is making us sick. During this NHPPA health tour, I would ask the question at the live events, or just point out that, like most of us, it's like we're on a walking journey and Health Canada's put a knapsack on our back with 100 pounds of toxins in it. But we can still walk around, we can still go to work, we can still go uphill, but we don't know what it's like to walk without that 100-pound weight on our back anymore. And it's likely, Marc, that no one in Canada actually knows what it's like to feel healthy anymore.
Yeah, I agree
with you. We all have a toxic load on us, and we are not getting what we need from our food. So every one of us needs to get advice from somebody who will, what are you eating? What's your lifestyle? And then they'll say you should take these supplements, these vitamins, these minerals, to avoid chronic sickness. And most people will find an improvement in mood.
So how much time you got left, Shawn?
Oh, what time is it?
It's 11:33 Pacific time.
Oh yeah, I got half an hour. So
oh, great! This is fantastic.
Yeah, because we're really having fun here, and it's a good conversation. You'll just have to. The sun's moving, so my light's gonna suck in a minute. But who cares?
What's unfortunate is because this is my first live stream, I haven't figured everything out. So supposedly on the chat they say I'm muted, but they could hear you. So that's good because we want to hear from you. Nobody wants to hear from me.
Well, no, but have you solved that problem?
You're good. I'm bad, which is okay because we want to hear from you anyway.
Well, yeah, except we're having a discussion. That makes no sense, but.
They could still hear me, but just not that loud, supposedly. So that's okay. I'm going to figure it out. And then the next time, hopefully we could do this again, because I think it's so important that Canadians know, because nobody else is covering any of this stuff.
No, that's the problem. That's how you know you're in a manufactured consent exercise. And, the interesting thing is remember we were talking about how this will be mandatory. So the goal for sure is to have us eating cloned meat without labeling, because the only advantage is the biopharmaceuticals. Like I say, they know cloned meat is prone to genetic defects and they can't predict the risks. They know that it creates animal cruelty. They know that, those few animals that survive will be filled with drugs and antibiotics and hormones, and that we shouldn't be eating them. And it's not like anyone's lining up to do this. So there's a completely different agenda, but it kind of raises the question is, how is it that we gave Health Canada authority over our food supply anyway? Like why have we given a government agency the right to say, well, it's okay to put this chemical in our food, which isn't okay? I mean, you and I both will test positive for glyphosate. There's no safe amount. It causes cancer. It leaches minerals from us. It shouldn't be allowed on crops. So how did we end up there? Like, we've all so trusted them that, until now, we've been willing to eat in restaurants. We're willing to just buy food We're not doing our own research. We're by and large we're not on detoxification protocols, and we should be. Listen, if you want to be healthy, if you want your kids to be healthy, you have to have detoxification protocols that you go through regularly. You need to basically have a whole house water filtration system. You need to have air filters. You need to be eating organic as best you can and supplementing, and you can't trust anything. Marc, long ago, the Minister of Health, they gave the Minister of Health authority to exempt food and drugs from most of our safety regulations. They just went overboard with this last thing, and now they can exempt from anything. And I'll just get back to that in a second. But it used to be the Minister of Health could exempt, a food from some of the safety requirements, but they had to publish it in the Canada Gazette. So you could hire somebody like me to tell you whether a food that you regularly eat complies with our food safety laws. Well, the Minister of Health could only do it if, concluded there wasn't a safety risk. Well, they took out, now the Minister of Health can exempt without it being safe, and they don't have to publish anymore. So I can't even, you could hire a lawyer like me, I can't even tell you if a food you regularly eat complies with our food safety laws. Now, that's a fraud. And in this 2024 budget, this BLC 69, the Minister of Health can exempt any food and drug from our fraud requirement. Like in the Food and Drug Act, we got all these regulations, but there's 3 lines in the sand that you could never cross. So they were actually in our Food and Drug Act as criminal laws. And one of them is you can't sell a food or drug fraudulently. You can't defraud the public. So in what circumstances is it okay to defraud the public about a food or a drug? I can't think of any circumstance where it's okay for the Canadian public to be defrauded about a food or a drug. And yet now the Minister of Health can permit that and allow it to be legal without letting us know. So the other safety requirement is adulteration. And in the Food and Drug Act, adulteration, really means with a dangerous substance. Well, now the Minister of Health can exempt a food or drug. It can be adulterated with a dangerous substance. Well, Marc, again, and it's a rhetorical question, on what planet is it okay for Canadians to eat or consume a food or a drug that's been adulterated with a dangerous substance? Like that's not in the public interest at all. The third line in the sand that can never be crossed is you have to manufacture food and drugs in a safe, clean environment. You can't manufacture them in an unsanitary way. It's just a safety line that we can't cross, because we learned that lives are lost when food and drugs are manufactured in unsanitary conditions. But now the Minister of Health can exempt food and drugs from unsanitary manufacturing conditions. And again, this is so not in the public interest. Our food and drug laws have become adversarial to the citizen, and the fact that we trust Health Canada at all is absolutely mind-blowing. But the media raises no alarm bells, and it was comfortable and easy. But you brought up that most of us are chronically sick. I think it's over half of Canadian children now have a chronic illness. For sure, that's the figure in the States. I think it's 54 or 57% of children in the States 12 and under have a chronic illness. Well, that's criminal. It used to be next to nothing. And in the last 20 years, we've seen the largest decline in health of our most vulnerable population ever witnessed in history, and nobody is looking into it.
I have a few questions, Shawn. Is there a place in the world that has a model that's working for the people, for health?
I don't know, but a lot of the third world just doesn't have the infrastructure. So, like my wife and I, we travel to a third world country every winter for a period of time. And we've noticed a pattern that after about 10 days of eating locally, we start feeling better.
Oh, interesting.
So, yeah, but I mean, it's more local food. It's not as processed. It's not as manufactured. and they don't have all the they still will have chemicals, but nowhere near like Canada. And I find it really interesting as a Canadian that, I need to go to third world countries to have healthier food.
We're worse than a third world country.
Oh, absolutely. I think we're probably, Canada and the US have the unsafest food in the world, bar none. The European Union has way safer food. Every other country, Canada and the US have the most dangerous food supply. So we have the most chemicals and we have the least nutrients. Full stop. No argument. The unsafest food in the world is North America.
And you know what the worst part is? Our food is not even cheap. It's the most expensive food ever. You go to other countries, and so I saw videos on Germany, and their food's a fraction of the price there, and that's in Europe.
Oh, I know, but you're not being fair. I mean, Marc, these chemicals aren't free.
Oh, that's
So,
what we're paying. We're paying for the freaking chemicals.
And it's got to be a little bit of work to include them all in our food supply. So, yeah, I mean, come on, let's be fair to our manufacturers. So
this is unbelievable. The more I talk to you, the more I'm like, wow, like I'm learning so much from you, Shawn, every single time. And that's why I'm so excited every time I'm able to have a conversation with you. I'm your biggest advocate. I want to help you wherever I can. I'm going to be doing clips of this show for sure. And I'm going to be talking to you on ways to educate the public, because CBC and mainstream media, they're going to be working hard against what I'll be publishing for sure. There'll be, I've seen before people that get really close to the truth, they attack them. They go after them and try to discredit the people. So it would be interesting to see if they start attacking me saying our food is super safe. There's this guy that YouTuber that thinks our food supply is dangerous. Yeah, that'll be interesting.
Well, they're going to have problems because, the US is starting to look at their food supply and starting to look at the chemicals they allow in their food, and is starting to address why are 57% of their children chronically sick? Because that is a red alert emergency. And the fact that we're not looking into it just tells us that, basically our food supply and our government regulatory bodies are captured and aren't acting in our interest anymore. Like, it's as simple as that. I mean, you were shocked with the test with the vaccinations. Well, look at the legal trail. It's not a secret. Of course, there's political messaging, and of course, we're always in manufactured consent exercises because that's how the government gets support for issues. And there's even a place for that, because you have to have some cohesion to move as a country in certain political directions, and they're not always bad directions. I mean, we can agree or disagree on the different directions. But it is important for people to understand, because the government's become so adversarial, you need to understand where it's happening so you can do your own research.
So, Shawn, since we've got about 15 minutes left, I think it would be a good opportunity to thank the people that are here on this live, and we could answer some of the questions that they have, because I don't have all the questions. So go ahead and leave some questions, and I'm going to start picking some. And then we'll see what comes from it.
Yeah, and Marc, I'm interested to see what the animal rights people do with this issue, because the mainstream media hid that from them. And so, we've got, like, Canadians, and it's something I really like about Canada, is, I mean, we're very sensitive towards the treatment of animals. And, the fact that, and anyone's free to go read the European Union scientific opinion paper on the cloning of meat. I mean, they really go into the animal cruelty issues. I'm really interested to see if that issue starts resonating, because the animal rights groups, they got no indication from the mainstream media that this is an issue. And it's a huge issue. It's a huge issue. And on that, aside from, human rights and human health issues, I'm curious to see if the animal rights groups pick up on this and start supporting it.
All right. I don't have any questions so far, so we could just continue on with, I'd like to go back to this document here.
Mhm.
The dangers of clone meat not being safeguarded against clone meat.
Yeah. Okay. So let's
Yeah.
let's talk about that. So, and it's a bit of a shell game, and so Health Canada, and a link to their scientific opinion is in this paper. It's not hard to find online. I don't think I'll just call it an opinion. I can't grace them with the term scientific because they're non-critical at all. When you do research into the dangers of genetically or cloned meat, and we're not even talking cloning genetically modified animals, right? Because they say they're not addressing that risk, and they're not addressing the risks of cloning of genetic defects. I've already described the process to you. I mean, they take the genetic material out of the egg, they take the full genetic material out of the animal they want to clone, out of a cell, they put it in the egg, they have to manipulate the egg with electricity and chemicals and whatever means they're choosing to try and convince the egg that it's now been fertilized and become what's called a zygote, which is, a fertilized egg that's viable. Well, that process invites genetic defects. It invites it's not a secret. You're playing at the cellular level, pulling out DNA, putting DNA in, manipulating the egg to try and accept this new DNA. It invites genetic defects, but you can't predict what part of the DNA is going to be damaged, defective. So because you can't predict what the genetic defects are going to be, you can't predict the risk. You just know you're creating eggs with genetic defects. Now, you're hoping that the eggs that with genetic defects will not be viable, or if they are viable, the animals won't survive to birth. And then you're hoping, well, those that are defective that do survive birth, they're not going to live long. And so Health Canada is just assuming, well, if it makes it to where you'll eat it, it can't have genetic defects. But let's not test for genetic defects. No, we know that's the big risk, but let's not test for it.
So I got a question here from Paul McIntosh. He says, what's preventing a few lawyers from getting together and forming a class action lawsuit against Health Canada for the benefits of all Canadians?
Well, we're not eating cloned meat yet. So a class action lawsuit. So first of all, it has to be a recognizable tort. Okay, so there has to be a cause of action. If somebody assaults you, there's a recognized tort for that. And then you also have to have somebody who is liable to you. Well, Health Canada, we're in what's called the administrative state, where we've given godlike powers over our lives to bureaucracies, and then we've shielded them from liability. So let's just use Health Canada as an example. How are you going to hold them liable? If you're in the industry, they're not liable. So I'll use the example of Regency RX. So they were a Winnipeg company that had a natural kind of erectile dysfunction product. Well, there's a lot of money, Marc, in erectile dysfunction. And this is, if I recall correctly, when Pfizer still had a patent on Viagra. Now the patent's run out, everyone can make sildenafil. Nobody's as concerned now with a natural product that might compete. They're still concerned because there's big money there. But so Health Canada came to Regency RX and said, we analyzed your product and we've found that it's spiked with chemicals. I don't know if they said it was spiked with sildenafil or what the chemicals were. I don't recall that now. So Regency RX did what you or I would do, and they sent samples of the same lot and batches that Health Canada was saying was spiked with chemicals to a lab. Oh my gosh, please confirm this problem. And the lab couldn't find what Health Canada found. So then Regency RX sent it to other labs, and nobody nobody could replicate what Health Canada found. Now, this company was destroyed by Health Canada. So Health Canada will have the media run stories, it's spiked, it's dangerous, orders recalls, all of this. So this company's destroyed. Well, they sue Health Canada because basically your lab was either negligent or fraudulent. And the court said, you can't sue Health Canada. They don't owe you a duty of care. Now, there's a recent court decision that says that Health Canada doesn't owe you or I a duty of care. So there was a teenager who was a hockey player named Shawn who died after the COVID-19 vaccine. And the issue isn't whether the COVID-19 vaccine caused his death. The issue was whether his family could sue Health Canada and hold them account because they approved the vaccine. Now, remember, they didn't approve it as safe and effective. That's political messaging. But they were under a legal duty to approve that vaccine. I think in Shawn Hartman's case, it was the Pfizer one. They were under a legal duty to approve it if Pfizer could make that argument that the benefits outweigh the risks despite the uncertainty. But the court said, no, you can't sue Health Canada because Health Canada is acting in the public interest when it approves a drug. It's not acting in an individual interest, so individuals can't sue Health Canada if they approve a drug that's unsafe. And even if they message fraudulently, because in my opinion, the messaging by Health Canada that the vaccines were proven to be safe and effective was political messaging that was fraudulent. But they don't owe us a duty of care, Marc. So to answer your viewer's question, what would be stopping lawyers from doing a class action suit, assuming people were harmed by cloned meat, is that we don't have the right to sue our government for dangerous decisions because they're not held to account. Now, if you're not held to account, then you do dangerous things, right? Let's I just did research. Like the Food and Drug Act is a criminal law act. And if you violate the act or the regulations, you should be charged criminally. And I've represented a bunch of natural health product companies charged criminally under the act. Well, it dawned on me the other day, I'm not aware of a single chemical pharmaceutical company, even though that's the majority, like it's 99% of the drug world. And, for most of the Food and Drug Act, the natural health community didn't even exist. So it was all of the drug world. So, 99.9% of criminal charges under the Food and Drug Act should be against big chemical drug companies. I can't find a single one, Marc. I can find natural health product companies charged. I can find drug dealers that, are charged with trafficking in cocaine, charged under the Food and Drug Act because they're cutting the cocaine with some pharmaceutical drugs. So it's kind of like piggyback charges. I can find small companies, not publicly traded companies, charged with selling sildenafil, so Viagra, when it was still under patent. But I can't find a single charge, a single incident where a chemical drug company is charged. So they're not held liable. The companies themselves, during the World's Greatest Health Show, the NHPPA put on, and anyone can watch it. It's online at nhppa.org. We had Professor Alan Castles from University of Victoria share that the third leading cause of death in Canada are the antidepressant drugs. And I was sharing that the third leading cause of death in Canada are all drugs. And that was my belief at the time, not just the chemical or the antidepressant drugs. Well, I followed up with Professor Castles after the show and said, can you point me to some of the latest research? Because I knew the chemical drugs taken as directed were one of the top 5 leading causes of death. So Professor Castles directed me to some research from, I think his last name is Goetz. He's a professor, a medical doctor who's a professor at the University of Copenhagen, who's an expert on this. And he's saying the leading cause of death are the chemical drugs taken as directed.
Yeah, I saw that as well.
Okay. So let's say it's the third leading cause of death. I'm thinking of, tongue in cheek, of starting a charity to raise money to help us address the third leading cause of death, assuming they are. Because, we've got charities raising money for cancer research to protect Canadians against cancer. We've got charity raising money to research into heart disease, how to protect us against heart disease. We don't have any charities raising funds to protect us against one of our leading causes of death, chemical drugs taken as directed. I think we need to find a cure, Mark. I think we need to protect the children. I think we need to raise funds into, to learn how we can reduce deaths from chemical pharmaceutical drugs. But anyway, I'm off on a tangent here. So
what if we
nobody's ever charged. There's no liability at all in the industry. There's no liability of Health Canada. They approve thalidomide, they approve Vioxx. They know for a long time these drugs are causing significant harm. Nobody's ever charged. They're not investigated criminally. We're in tyranny. And what tyranny, just look up the word in the dictionary, it just means absolute discretion. And when you're not held to account for your decisions, you have absolute discretion. So Health Canada can be captured by the pharmaceutical industry. It doesn't matter, because they will not be charged criminally or civilly for decisions that harm us. They have absolute discretion. They're completely free they're above the law. And civil courts will not hold them to account. They're above the law. So we're in a situation where that agency responsible for protecting us is above the law. Well, I'm sorry, listen. Let's say you and I, we're the board of a chemical pharmaceutical company. You and me and the listener. So we're the board of directors. And the lawyer's in there. So we're having the Vioxx discussion. Listen, it's clear that we're causing whole number of deaths. We're causing excess. We should pull this. The ethical thing to do is pull this to save lives. But we're making tens of billions of dollars on this. And we can probably keep it on the market for years. And our estimate is that, we're going to have to pay, I don't know, $50 billion in civil lawsuits in the States, not in Canada. But we're going to make, $200 million in that time. Well, we actually, and oh, by the way, none of us will be charged. The company won't be charged. There certainly will be no civil liability concerns to you, and the decisions made to keep it on the market. Now, let's say we had a legal environment where people were responsible for the decisions. So, Mark, you and me and your viewers, we're all on the board, and the legal environment's different, and the lawyer's saying this drug's killing people. You now know it. If we continue to sell it, every one of us is going to spend the rest of our lives in jail, and all of our property is going to be taken in civil suits. Do we make a different decision, Mark?
Absolutely.
Same with Health Canada.
So this is just a thought. What if there was a nonprofit group that took funds and had a team of people that just researched to, just us. We're doing, you're doing the hard work. I'm just providing the platform. But it seems like if we need more people to be reviewing this stuff to keep them accountable, because if the whole population watched this live stream, I'm sure there would be people at government buildings saying, we need to take down Health Canada. This is ridiculous. Like they're making us sick. We need accountability.
Oh yeah, no, we do. The whole system's broken. It's not just Health Canada as a bureaucracy. We basically have an entire administrative state that is no longer responsive to the citizens. And back in 1776, the Americans called that taxation without representation. So the people that are actually making decisions affecting our lives are not accountable to us, and they're not accountable to our elected representatives. So, power has been delegated, and the real issue is when did you and I give over power over our lives to decide that, our food supply could be unsafe? The public messaging is that no, they're taking care of us. They're making sure our food supply is safe. They're making sure our food supply is nutritious. Mark, I shared with you how there's certain they're called essential nutrients. There's a list of them. There's a certain number of essential fatty acids. There's a couple of those. There's vitamins. There's minerals. There's essential nutrients that you will die if you're missing a single one. But before you die, you'll become chronically sick. We know what they are. It's illegal in Canada for natural health manufacturers to sell you vital nutrients in the amounts you need to be healthy. It's against the law. Health Canada's got this list of daily recommended amounts, which every one of us will be sick and die if we follow. You cannot sell, like take vitamin D as an example. We're limited to 2,000 international units. That's micrograms.
That's nothing.
It's nothing. You might as well not take it. You're going to be chronically sick. And vitamin D is essential, not just for your immune system, for a bunch of other things. But it's illegal for a manufacturer to actually tell you the truth and tell you what you should take. So the label has to be this amount that is guaranteed to be meaningless. Well, how can it be that we found ourselves in a legal philosophical environment in Canada where it's actually illegal? So it's illegal to sell vital nutrients in the amount that Canadians need to be healthy. How is that? How is it possible that the government basically we need the government's permission to sell vital nutrients? We need the government's permission to sell ginger tea to help alleviate nausea, even though we've been using it for 3,000 years to do that safely and effectively. How can it be that Health Canada has been given powers to tell us it's illegal for us to treat ourselves or access nutrients without their permission? There's only been one, other than Canadians, there's only been one class of people in history that didn't have the ability to choose how to prevent illness or how to treat illness, and we call that class slaves. Well, there's two classes now. There's slaves and there's Canadians. We might as well get farm animal ear tags.
It's unbelievable, Shawn. Well, we're at our time here. Every single time we get together, I've learned so much, and I know that I'm going to learn more. I would love to have you on again.
The NHPPA is going to be having a show on December 17th. I'd like to invite you on, and we can carry on this conversation.
Oh, I'd love to come on your show. Absolutely. That would be great.
So it's going to be at 8 p.m. Eastern is when we'll have you on. It starts a little earlier. But yeah, so we'll invite you on at 8 p.m. Eastern, and we'll just kind of flesh this out before then. And
on the 18th.
On the 17th of December at 8 p.m. Eastern, we'll have you on.
All right, I'll get back to you. I'm going to have to move.
Okay, yeah, check your calendar, but we'd love to. And I always enjoy these conversations, Marc.
Yeah, and you know what? Just don't be shy. Message me, and if there's something important that you put together, I'm going to share all this stuff. But if you got something that you want me to publish, let me know. I'm going to make sure everybody sees it, because your work is so important, and for it not to be shared with every Canadian, we need to get it out there. So everybody.
Yeah, and I know you watch the NHPPA social media. We'll be putting out some videos on these points too. You know, and some we've had a little bit of fun because, you know, I kind of wonder, because the media's missed so much here, so many important points. We're thinking of taking up a collection to raise some funds to pay for internet connections for the mainstream media so that they can do research before they publish their stories, because obviously they don't have access to the internet. You know, because they're just missing all these obvious points. I think we need to be sympathetic, right? So.
You're doing a great job, Shawn. I thank you so much. I mean, you know, whenever I think of you, I'm like, this guy's like, he was sent from the guy upstairs. You're helping Canadians. We want to all be healthy and safe. And we don't know without people like you that's providing the information, because we're busy, we're working. Everybody's, you know, hopes that we're getting taken care of by our agencies. And it's just shocking to find out what's going on.
But we really don't know, except for people like you, because the mainstream media is not going to be sharing this information. So thank you for what you're doing. because it's the
Absolutely.
only way people can know.
Absolutely. All right. Okay. This was
Okay.
a good live stream, and we're gonna do it again, I'm sure. And I'll be showing up to Shawn as long as I could move some things around. So I'll publish that. I'll let everybody know if I'll be over there as well, and I'll let you know as well, Shawn.
Super. Thanks, Mark.
Thank you.